Chapter 10. Frankie began coming to Western Biological when he was 11 years old. For a week or so, he just stood outside the basement door and looked in. Then, one day, he stood inside the door. 10 days later, he was in the basement. He had very large eyes, and his hair was a dark, wiry, dirty shock. His hands were filthy. He picked up a piece of Excelsior and put it in a garbage can, and then he looked at Doc, where he worked, labeling specimen bottles containing purple Valhalla. Finally, Frankie got to the workbench and he put his dirty fingers on the bench. It took Frankie 3 weeks to get that far, and he was ready to bolt every instant of the time. Finally, one day, Doc spoke to him. "What's your name, son?" "Frankie." "Where do you live?" "Up there," a gesture up the hill. "Why aren't you in school?" "I don't go to school." "Why not?" "They don't want me there." "Your hands are dirty. Don't you ever wash?" Frankie looked stricken, and then he went to the sink and scrubbed his hands, and always afterwards he scrubbed his hands almost raw every day. And he came to the laboratory every day. It was an association without much talk. Doc, by a telephone call, established that what Frankie said was true. They didn't want him in school. He couldn't learn, and there was something a little wrong with his coordination. There was no place for him. He wasn't an idiot. He wasn't dangerous. His parents, or parent, would not pay for his keep in an institution. Frankie didn't often sleep at the laboratory, but he spent his days there. And sometimes he crawled in the Excelsior crate and slept. That was probably when there was a crisis at home. Doc asked, "Why do you come here?" "You don't hit me or give me a nickel," said Frankie. "Do they hit you at home?" "There's uncles around all the time at home. Some of them hit me and tell me to get out, and some of them give me a nickel and tell me to get out." "Where's your father?" "Dead," said Frankie vaguely. "Where's your mother?" "With the uncles." Doc clipped Frankie's hair and got rid of the lice. At Lee Chong's, he got him a new pair of overalls and a striped sweater, and Frankie became his slave. "I love you," he said one afternoon. "Oh, I love you." He wanted to work in the laboratory. He swept out every day, but there was something a little wrong. He couldn't get a floor quite clean. He tried to help with grading crayfish for size. They were in a bucket, all sizes. They were to be grouped in the big pans, laid out, all the 3-inch ones together, and all the 4-inch ones, and so forth. Frankie tried, and the perspiration stood in his forehead, but he couldn't do it. Size relationships just didn't get through to him. "No," Doc would say. "Look, Frankie, put them beside your finger like this, so you'll know which ones are this long. See, this one goes from the tip of your finger to the base of your thumb. Now, you just pick out another one that goes from the tip of your finger down to the same place, and it will be all right." Frankie tried, and he couldn't do it. When Doc went upstairs, Frankie crawled in the Excelsior box and didn't come out all afternoon. But Frankie was a nice, good, kind boy. He learned to light Doc's cigars, and he wanted Doc to smoke all the time so he could light the cigars. Better than anything else, Frankie loved it when there were parties upstairs in the laboratory. When girls and men gathered to sit and talk, when the great phonograph played music that throbbed in his stomach and made beautiful and huge pictures form vaguely in his head, Frankie loved it. Then he crouched down in a corner behind a chair where he was hidden and would watch and listen. When there was laughter at a joke he didn't understand, Frankie laughed delightedly behind his chair, and when the conversation dealt with abstractions, his brow furrowed and he became intent and serious. One afternoon, he did a desperate thing. There was a small party in the laboratory. Doc was in the kitchen pouring beer when Frankie appeared beside him. Frankie grabbed a glass of beer and rushed it through the door and gave it to a girl sitting in a big chair. She took the glass and said, "Why, thank you." And she smiled at him. And Doc, coming through the door, said, "Yes, Frankie is a great help to me." Frankie couldn't forget that. He did the thing in his mind over and over, just how he had taken the glass and just how the girl sat, and then her voice, "Why, thank you." And Doc, "A great help to me. Frankie is a great help to me. Sure, Frankie is a great help. Frankie, and oh my God." He knew a big party was coming because Doc bought steaks and a great deal of beer, and Doc let him help clean out all the upstairs. But that was nothing, for a great plan had formed in Frankie's mind, and he could see just how it would be. He went over it again and again. It was beautiful. It was perfect. Then the party started, and people came and sat in the front room, girls and young women and boys. Frankie had to wait until he had the kitchen to himself and the door closed, and it was some time before he had it so. But at last he was alone and the door was shut. You could hear the chatter of conversation and the music from the great phonograph. He worked very quietly, first the tray, then get out the glasses without breaking any. Now fill them with beer and let the foam settle a little and then fill again. Now he was ready. He took a great breath and opened the door. The music and the talk roared around him. Frankie picked up the tray of beer and walked through the door. He knew how. He went straight toward the same young woman who had thanked him before. And then, right in front of her, the thing happened. The coordination failed, the hands fumbled, the panicked muscles, the nerves telegraphed to a dead operator. The responses did not come back. Tray and beer collapsed forward into the young woman's lap. For a moment, Frankie stood still, and then he turned and ran. The room was quiet. They could hear him run downstairs and go into the cellar. They heard a hollow scrabbling sound and then silence. Doc walked quietly down the stairs and into the cellar. Frankie was in the Excelsior box, burrowed down clear to the bottom, with the pile of Excelsior on top of him. Doc could hear him whimpering there. Doc waited for a moment, and then he went quietly back upstairs. There wasn't a thing in the world he could do.